I don't think there is a tension. In fact, I think there's a huge alignment in promoting holistic development, and that academic development is a natural outcome of that holistic development, because human beings are multifaceted. We're multifaceted people, and we have lots of dimensions to our character. We would often say in our school, a happy student will be a successful student, and students will naturally not be happy all the time. And part of our role is in schools is to help them navigate those bumps on the road and those challenges that they will inevitably face.
Welcome to the Independent School Podcast. Thinking and acting strategically is the key to both securing the future of your school and helping to build a more equal and just world. My name's Juliette Corbett. I'm a consultant, speaker and facilitator specialising in helping independent schools. In this podcast, I translate tried and tested strategy and fundraising techniques into a language that works for schools. So if you're a senior leader in a private school and you want your daily work to feel less exhausting and more strategic, and if you want once more to feel the joy of making the world a better place through education, then you're in the right place. Welcome, and let's get started on this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode, where I'm really delighted to be joined by Margaret Giblin, Head of Marymount International School London. And Margaret and I are really pleased to be sharing this conversation with you, where we explore the really important role of involving people in strategy. So she shares the journey that she's led the school community on as it's been developing its new strategic plan, and in particular how she's been involving staff, students and parents. And actually in our conversations outside the actual interview for this podcast, she's also been sharing with me how important it was that they involved their alumni in those conversations as well. As well as talking about strategy development and leading your community and involving people, and we also talk about the importance of encouraging global citizenship in our young people and how they do that at Marymount as an international school. So Marymount International School London is an independent Catholic all-girls day and boarding school. And in fact, it was the first all-girls school in the UK to adopt the International Baccalaureate. It was founded in 1955, and Marymount International London is actually part of a much wider network of schools directed by the Religious and Sacred Heart of Mary, or RSHM. That organisation was established back in 1849, and RSHM has now grown to have a network of 20 schools across 3 continents. Margaret joined Marymount London as head in January 2021 from Woldingham Catholic School for Girls, where she was senior deputy head. She has over 20 years of experience in education, both in the UK and Ireland. She holds an MA in Catholic School Leadership from St Mary's University and obtained her higher diploma in teaching and BA in Theology and English at the National University of Ireland and St Patrick's Pontifical University, respectively. So many people have told me that this podcast helps them, which is great because helping people is why I create these weekly episodes. And I also hear from lots of people who need a bit more support. For those schools, I facilitate strategy away days for governors and leadership teams. I guide heads and chairs of governors through the creation and implementation of new strategic plans. And I lead regular one-to-one strategy advice calls with heads and directors of development. And the best part of my job is hearing from the people I work with that they're clearer about what to prioritise day to day. They're better able to lead change in their schools, and they feel happier and more confident that they're making good strategic decisions. So anytime that you feel like you need a bit of extra help, just drop me a message so we can chat. You'll find my contact details at www.consultjuliette.co.uk. So without any further ado, I hope you enjoy my conversation with Margaret Giblin. So hello, Margaret, and welcome to the Independent School Podcast.
Oh, good morning, Juliette, and thank you very much for inviting me. It really is a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. So one of the things I'd like to kick off with is understanding what it is about education that really drives you, the reason that you're forging your career in this sector, and the reason that you're feeling that headship is a way that you can deliver within the education sector. What is it that first got you interested in becoming teaching?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. Actually, from a very young age, I always had the desire to be a teacher, and I do feel very strongly about the vocational element of the profession. And through my own education, I enjoyed being in school, always have done, which is why I often say I've never left. Equally, I think for me, as I matured, I initially toyed with the idea of primary versus secondary education, and then realised that the passion for my two subjects, theology and English, were very strong, and that actually I wanted to study those together and then move into secondary school education. But there was never a doubt in my mind that I wouldn't be a teacher. It was always the plan, and I feel very fortunate perhaps to have had that certainty, because it has certainly never felt like the wrong choice to me in my 25 plus years of being in education. And I suppose the passion for me lies in the impact education has across all facets of the human being. And I'm a great passionate advocate of holistic education. Whilst I think academic education is essential, and of course every school is always aiming to really develop that potential in all of their students, I think for me, and certainly in my school currently, and in the schools I actually ended up teaching in, the commitment to the development of the whole person was equally as valuable as their academic success. And for me, that enables students to really discover who they are in a very safe environment within school, try passions, fail well, fail brilliantly, fail safely, learn from those mistakes. It's an opportunity for the passions to ignite, for that little spark to turn into an ember, to turn into a flame. And I think probably the greatest satisfaction is when you see a student grow and develop from first year through to when they leave school with you and going on to actually study or into an occupation that they really wish to sort of get fulfillment in. And I think that for me is the driving force of education. And I think that's why education is always evolving. So there's something, it's never the same, year on year, day on day, week on week. And I think that's a huge gift. And we're always seeking as educators to prepare our students for the world they will enter, which actually means that we as educators are always learning. And I just think that dynamic and that constant challenge and evolution and student-centered approach means that we're always trying to improve and to develop, and it just adds a wonderful dynamic to a school, and it's a wonderful environment to go into every day because of the dynamism, the joy, the laughter, the curiosity, the development of skills. I just feel very fortunate really to be in the profession.
Yeah, I can really connect with so much you've just said, and I think that sense of it preparing young people for a really kind of fulfilling life. Yes. And the fact that the world around us is constantly changing, so we have to be forward looking, because we're preparing them now for when they're going to be going out into the world, you know, in many years' time. And I think that you're right, that is what makes it constantly challenging. This isn't that we're looking for some kind of perfection and then we can stop developing as a sector. There is this inherent change that even if we ever find perfection in terms of that kind of educational system that's perfect, which of course we never would, but even if we did, society is changing, the workplace is changing, the challenges we face as a humankind, we're also changing. And so there is this sense that this moving forwards is never going to stop, and that really does make it exciting.
It does, absolutely.
And to know that the changes that we can make to our education system today can actually enable even greater change to happen as those individuals, those young people, go out into the world and make a difference. And really share that with you, absolutely. The other thing you touch on there, which I think is actually really interesting and important, is, and I talk about this with a lot of school leaders, talking about the balance between the academic education, which is really important, and that holistic approach to the whole person. And I think it's really interesting, actually, as someone within education, but actually also as a parent as well, to reflect on to what extent we as a society at the moment see those sometimes at least in tension, whereas in actual fact, they're not in tension. You have to have the holistic side in order to achieve the full academic potential within these young people. Do you have thoughts on how you've communicated that to parents or to staff, and the way your thinking's developed on that over time?
I think you're absolutely right. I don't think there is a tension. In fact, I think there's a huge alignment. in promoting holistic development, and that academic development is a natural outcome of that holistic development, because human beings are multifaceted. We're multifaceted people, and we have lots of dimensions to our character. We would often say in our school, a happy student will be a successful student, and students will naturally not be happy all the time. And part of our role is in schools is to help them navigate those bumps on the road and those challenges that they will inevitably face. But I suppose where it has come from is certainly in my educational career. I've taught in many different schools. I've taught in the maintained sector, in the independent sector, in co-ed, in boys, but primarily I've taught in all girls education, and primarily I've taught in the faith school context as well. Mm-hmm. And the idea of human flourishing is very much at the heart of what we seek to achieve, and what I seek to achieve in my school. In fact, it's one of our strategic pillars is to promote human flourishing. And that really comes out of the belief that we have to draw out the potential of our students. And that comes in a variety of ways. And in my current school, we actually have, we do the middle years programme and the diploma programme of the IB curriculum. And that by its very nature actually really lends itself to the holistic development of the individual, because of the IB learner profile skills that we're constantly teaching, whether that's balance, risk taker, self-regulated learning, all of those attributes of what it is to be a learner that are very much sort of imbued in that curriculum, enables us as a school, as a teacher in the classroom, as a head teacher, to really be constantly talking about that breadth of development, that holistic development. And also as a school, we're an RSHM school, a Marymount school, which is part of a global network of schools, but that is rooted in a tradition that has as its central mission that all may have life and have it to the full. And that again is about that breadth of development. So I think when you see students fully embrace all of their skills, whether that is, to stand on the stage, to be an amazing musician or sports player or artist or debater, or even just to lead in our school, it might be to lead a liturgy. You see that actually they're drawing out all of those aspects of their being. And that really does, to my mind, and certainly with our school setting, really bring a huge amount of wealth to the educational experience. And interestingly, you mentioned how we convey that to parents. We're very clear to parents at the beginning that this is our approach to education, that it doesn't detract from or diminish our commitment to academic development nor academic results, but that actually our measure of success is about the development of the whole human being, and it is about the breadth of success that comes with all of those opportunities and experiences that happen along the way, that maybe give somebody a little bit of confidence or develop their compassion or develop patience or tenacity. And I think the alignment of our sort of school ethos and the IB curriculum places me in a really fortunate position, because it's a very potent recipe for that.
And it's interesting, I think that educators and parents, that the end result is everyone's looking for the same goal, which is that each and every young person is able to fulfill, to reach their full potential in all different areas, including academics, but also including all those other areas that you mentioned, and that the skill set that underlies a successful life is what education is about. I think what's interesting is then that different schools naturally will take different routes to get to the same end goal, and then that offers the choice that parents can have within the system to enable them to choose a school that aligns with the way that they feel about it. So you joined Marymount London in January 2021. As we know, it's been a couple of difficult years in terms of pandemic and shifts and changes and all the rest of it. But I imagine that so I know that also that you went through a strategic planning process soon after you arrived. And so I would love to hear a little bit more about how you went about clarifying what that end goal was, that vision that you've just articulated, and then how you worked out as a school community how you were going to get there, what kind of strategic choices you were going to make along the way. I'd love if you could share a little bit about the steps you took.
Absolutely, yes. So it was an interesting time to join, Juliet, certainly, and I joined, and immediately, well, in January, the schools went back into lockdown. So much of my initial meetings were virtually. But I was appointed the previous May. So it did mean that I was able to begin a little bit of the groundwork in that first term, even though I wasn't necessarily at Marymount at that point. So initially, how I went about developing the strategic plan was, first of all, sort of ascertaining where we were at and what we felt as working closely with the governing body, but also with the SLT in the first instance, ascertaining where the school was, and then trying to tease out the aspirations that I had as an individual coming in as a new head, but also that the governing body had, that the SLT had from their experience. And from a process of discussion, we actually came up with sort of core pillars that we wanted to focus on, and we had 6 that we felt that we wanted to develop these 6 areas within the school, because that was going to enable us to realise our ultimate aim. And our ultimate aim is very much aligned with the mission of the school. At that point, it was very, very important that obviously I went out to all of the constituents of the school, and particularly our staff. So we held several sessions with our staff, first of all saying, are you happy with these core pillars, these core areas? Are they the ones that you feel are aligned? And then we also did a workshop where we asked them to reflect on what they felt were the primary objectives under each of those pillars. So we did a really interesting workshop actually with the staff. Similarly, we did likewise with the students, which was staff-led in small tutor advisor groups. So we talked about, these are sort of the core areas. What do you see as the key core objectives, or more importantly to the students? You know, what outcome do you want to see under this heading? And we could then scale it back to the objective. And then we also engaged with parents through survey, and all of this was happening with the staff and the students. I waited until we had come back into school in March, because I felt it was very important that we were able to actually discuss and to talk about these things, and it didn't feel quite right virtually to doing that. Equally, then once we'd done sort of our internal community, then we went to our parent body. At which point then we worked quite hard to distill and refine the feedback we'd had into sort of core objectives under each of those strategic pillars, each of those strategic aims. And from that, that worked really well. And again, we were still consulting. We then went back to our governing body for the top line ratification of that. So that was really a really useful process also for me as a new head coming into a school, because I began quickly to understand the various areas of growth that the different stakeholders were recognising, or that they saw, and that ranges from the people who are actively sort of leading in those areas, and people who were, you know, perhaps more observers and less participatory in the day-to-day life of that. But it was a huge advantage to me as an incoming head, because it opened a lot of dialogue, which I found hugely beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so when we did that, then obviously you have your core principles, and then the important thing then is, how are we going to implement this? So what we sought to do was to initially break it into short, medium and long term. So nearly from each objective to talk about how we might realise those objectives and the various actions that might need to take place. And then we distilled into an annual development plan, which we're currently working on. And within that annual development plan, this is what we would like to achieve within this academic year.
Yeah.
These are the KPIs. This is how we're going to measure it. But equally, each department is also feeding into that. So we have our ADP, which is the overall school document, feeding into, the strategic plan. But then each department is asking how they can also contribute to the annual objectives. And that's really useful. And it gives empowerment, and I hope it brings with it a sense of community working towards a common aim, because this is not my strategic plan. It is our strategic plan. It's a school community, and I think that engagement is actually also one of our pillars, is really important to help realise it. And we've since we've done that, you know, when we did our annual development plan, we did run working parties on each of them, where people could opt to come and talk about okay, are these the right focus for this upcoming year? You know, and we have to question ourselves, what is realistic, what is manageable, because I think sometimes the temptation is to be overzealous in your in what you believe you can achieve in what is an academic year. So we really had to think carefully and keep it very aligned to the overall objectives. So keep those annual targets very much that we could see the stepping stones they were bringing us towards achieving the overall objective.
Yeah, I've heard someone say, I think it really rings true for me at least, is people overestimate what they can achieve in 1 year. So people are too ambitious for a 1 year plan, but then they underestimate what they can achieve in 5 years. So if you've got a longer term plan, actually you can achieve quite a lot over that time. And I think that's quite a useful thing just to have in the back of your mind when you're writing those strategic plans and annual development plans. Yeah, absolutely. So what you've just described, though, I think it is a fantastic best practice model for developing strategy. I think the way that you involved those key groups of the staff, the students, the parents, is really important, because you want to get the best ideas, and that's not going to come from one person writing this over a weekend, but also it creates that buy-in, as you said, that engagement, so that people feel this is our plan. I wonder if the flip side of that sometimes is that you end up actually with a plan that says everything, because you don't want to disappoint anybody. And because you've involved everyone, you don't want them to feel let down that their contribution hasn't been included. Did you at any point feel that you were having to make a kind of a tough leadership decision about, actually, this, I understand what this group of people is telling me, but actually we're not going to do that, or at least not right now? Have you had to make some of those tough choices?
Yeah, I think through the process, and there was a process of dialogue. There are times I did have to say, you know, actually, I really understand and see the wealth in that, but at this point, this isn't an area we can go down, because we need to prioritize other things. And I feel that when people understand why, sometimes I think the challenge or the frustration can arise when we might not understand it, because we've had lots of discussions about strategy, but we forget to convey to individuals why we're not going down that route. So I think I'm a great believer in telling people why you're doing something, but also in telling people why you've chosen not to do something. And I think for the most part, there was a genuine understanding of that, and it isn't a total dismissal. It's just saying, look, at this point in time, we, you know, whether it be, you know, we would need to, there'd be infrastructural implications of doing that at this point in time we're not ready to pursue, or whatever the conversation is. But I think once we were able to explain it and to keep it very rooted in the vision and the mission of the strategic aim, and it's very student-centred, because we're always asking ourselves, what is going to be best for our students? Is this going to serve them best? Is it the best use of resource, energy, development over the next 5 years? And I think, you know, I'm really fortunate that, you know, the community I'm part of, everyone understands that is our common aim, is really for our students.
It's really interesting. You basically just completely echoed the talk that I did a couple of weeks ago for the IDPE conference for school fundraisers, talking about the importance of saying no to things that don't fit your strategic objectives or your strategic plan. And when I was telling people kind of how you might actually say no to people, it was exactly that. It was to remind them what the goal is, remind them of your vision, explain how this doesn't fit, or you don't have enough resources, you don't have enough time to do everything. So this could be the best idea in the world, but if it doesn't fit to deliver those particular objectives, you're going to have to say no, because there are other ways that you've allocated, you know, scarce resource of time, facilities, resource, etc., in order to pursue ideas which enable us to deliver those particular objectives quicker or more effectively, or in a more kind of transformational way, whatever the situation might be. But 100%. And I'd be interested to think about as well. So when you developed, you mentioned your 6 pillars within your strategic plan. And also in the back of our minds, you've also mentioned, you know, the difficult time with COVID. There are also other trends that we're living through at the moment, in terms of the cost of living, in terms of changing attitudes towards equality, diversity, inclusion, and so on. I wondered whether you've made any direct links between some of the shifts and changes in the society, in the economy, and the ways in which you're focusing those six pillars. Are there particular things that you're focusing in on because you're noticing them as being significant challenges within the sector?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, and I think that's part of the I think when you launch a strategic plan, part of it is to remember that it is not necessarily fixed, that there has to be an element of agility and adaptability to it. And I think what it has helped us do is perhaps not necessarily alter the strategic plan. We've had it in mind, but maybe our priorities are realigning it in light of the circumstance we're finding ourselves in.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, one of our, as I said to you, one of our pillars was human flourishing. And we're talking about that very much in, how can we really help those who have struggled coming out of the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
how are we best supporting those people? What is it that we can do to really help people recalibrate back into school life, which was very disjointed for 2+ years, and suddenly we're trying to get back into a greater sense of normality.
Mm-hmm.
I think also when we talk about sort of our development and our sustainability, we're thinking very much about the financial sustainability, whether it be with energy prices, but also thinking about our families and bursarial support that might be needed. So in that sense, I think the landscape in which you're living has to be a lens through which you look at your strategic plan and potentially then maybe adapt a little bit priorities that you might have put in place, but actually thinking, okay, is now the right time, for example, to start, whether it be a huge development drive, for example,
Mm-hmm.
or do we need to actually shift slightly on that focus because this is a priority, a greater priority at this time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I don't think that will change. I think this time next year we'll be doing the same. We'll be reviewing it in light of what the environment is, and like we said at the very beginning, I think the fact that schools are human institutions in a landscape that is always changing, I think you should always, and we would always like to, at the start, when we're reviewing both, either looking back at how successful we've been, but also at looking what our priorities would be next year, we'll always try and take those broader considerations into account, whilst maintaining, though, the core of the strategy, because you still have to do your utmost to deliver that strategy.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the way that you structured it, having those annual development plans enables you to have that agility. And one of the things that I sometimes talk to governors or heads who are worried about committing to maybe a 5-year plan, for example, what happens if things change so much as they have done over recent years and we can't deliver? It's like, well, you explain to people that things have changed, you have to be agile, you have to adjust. And I think, but what it does do, though, is it gives you that North Star. It gives you a vision, a set of values, a set of priorities, which enables you to assess, okay, these other things are changing around us. Do we need to shift our emphasis or not? Well, the key question would be, are we still going to achieve that North Star, that vision? Are we going to deliver that? Or is what's happening around us preventing us from doing that? In which case you would need to make a shift. So to have that, even though it's constantly evolving, it is useful because it provides you that sense of a direction, which I think as leaders is absolutely a core part of what we do for the schools or organisations that we lead.
Yeah, I totally agree, Juliet. I often say when we talk about our mission of our school, and it's a little bit like, because that underpins, obviously, the vision of our school, that underpins our strategic plan. It's almost like our anchor and our guide. It's rooting us in what we want to do, but it's also driving us forward. And I think that certainly for me and within our community is really important.
Absolutely. You mentioned earlier that much of your experience has been within all girls schools and within faith schools as well. I wonder whether there are particular issues within that enable you to focus in your efforts in a way that enables you to overcome certain challenges that schools face within those parts of the education sector. What are your thoughts around whether your strategy would be exactly the same if it was, for example, a non-faith school or a mixed school? To what extent is it informed by those features?
Yeah, I think it is very informed by those features. I think the tradition and the heritage of our school and the ethos and mission is so well articulated. And whilst we are a faith school, we have we're a Catholic school. We have students of all faiths and no faiths, and yet there is this very strong sense of mission and ethos. And I think that is the beauty of the mission of the school, that it very much speaks to the development of all human beings and the value of all human beings. And I think fundamentally that is I suppose a principle that aligns itself to more widely than just within a Catholic sector. And I think in that sense, it certainly is at the core of our strategic plan. So we are always thinking about that all may have life and have it to the full, and about the value of each individual, which is why the commitment to holistic education is there. As I said to you earlier, it's why the IB also aligns itself very, very nicely to that with its breadth of approach. So I think to a certain degree, would I have the same strategic plan in another school? Possibly, yes, but not necessarily with the same level of detail. Does that make sense? Not necessarily with the same content, but I do believe that fundamentally our strategic plan aims to have our school as the best school it can possibly be, with all constituents feeling both excited by that, fulfilled by it, our students being as educated in the holistic way as possible, going out into the world, ready for what they will encounter. And I think as an educationalist in all schools I've been in, whether they were faith, non-faith, I have always maintained that commitment to each and every individual reaching their potential.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? We almost feel like every school should have a unique strategic plan, but actually the majority of maybe the headings, the general gist of what you're putting in your plan will be quite similar to many other schools. And that's a good thing, because actually that is displaying a sense of you following best practice, an understood model or best practice about what a good education looks like. Yeah. And then, as you said, the detail, the absolute kind of content of like what action are we going to take this year, that will be completely unique to each school, because every school will have a different starting point at the beginning of each year in terms of where it is, both culturally, in terms of school culture, in terms of finances and the local marketplace it sits in, and of course the educational emphasis that it's trying to pursue during its academic delivery during the year as well.
I agree, Julia. I suppose the one differential may be, one of our strategic aims is developing ethos and mission, and that's going to be very particular to our school or to the schools within our network. And, many schools have a particular ethos or mission, and that perhaps is the distinctive element, that thread that should run through their strategy also, because that is very particular maybe to them. But you're right about the core principles are largely aligned across all schools. Yeah.
So we've mentioned that we've been through a tumultuous couple of years. I wonder whether you feel that your leadership style has shifted and changed, because obviously we've done some of this virtually in terms of not being able to get into the school, but also in terms of leading a community where resilience has been challenged during this last couple of years, both staff and students. And I wonder whether you've reflected on the way in which your leadership style has shifted as a result of that.
It's a really interesting question, Juliet. This is my first headship, so in that sense, I don't have a previous headship to refer to. But I suppose my leadership style when I was a deputy and in all other leadership roles as I went up through the school, I don't necessarily feel it has changed, the style. I think I've grown and I've learned, and I've acquired new skills. And certainly in a pandemic, there were skills that I didn't even know I had, I was drawing on. But part of that was actually drawing on the skill set of my team, because to start a new school in the middle of a global pandemic, I didn't know all of the constituents straight away, all of my students and staff and parents. My leadership team and middle leaders and teachers, they knew their colleagues and their students. So I drew on that also a lot, so that they were able to inform. I think the adaptability, I think maybe there is a resilience that comes with starting in the midst of a pandemic, because you have no choice. I just had to get on with it, and that was it, and embrace what was there. And actually what we found, and which was really heartening, was that we had a phrase during lockdown, and I cannot claim this at all, was together yet apart. And we felt that our community was able to feel connected, even though we were all over the globe. We had some students with us because we're boarding school. We had some, senior leadership in school. We had teachers teaching all over around, but there was that together yet apart. And then this year we had a theme of people of hope, because we were hopeful for what was coming. So has my leadership style changed? I think I've grown certainly as a leader. I think I've encountered things that I hadn't encountered before. Perhaps my style has remained similar, but I have certainly grown in that capacity.
I think we've all been forced to, haven't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Only my technical skills, Juliet. I mean, I learned Teams in the space of, I think we all did, in the space of 4 weeks, we're all suddenly proficient.
Exactly. And it has sped up some of those changes for the good, as well as some of those changes that have been real challenges as well. Yeah, absolutely. I wonder if we could finish just thinking about some of the myths around independent education, and also perhaps also international schools as well. Are there what's kind of the one myth that you feel people hold that you'd like to debunk, if you could?
Oh, I'd have several, Julia. I'll have to pick one.
Go for it.
I think one myth, perhaps an interesting that you mentioned in international school, we are, obviously Marymount International School is what we are, but one of the myths about that is that it is a very transient population, and actually that isn't the case. And when we talk about international, I often say it's less an adjective and more of a verb, because what international sort of means for us is internationally minded. And I think there's a great wealth that comes with having students from across the world, which we do. Whilst many live in London, they are coming from many different heritages and cultures and traditions. It creates a real sense of being internationally minded, a genuine curiosity about one another, about one's culture and maybe religion and different celebrations. And, I moving into that, which for me has been so enriching, because it is genuinely a wonderfully vibrant environment, but a wonderfully accepting and respectful environment. And we talk about global citizenship, and I do truly believe that we are a little microcosm of the globe. And when our students leave, they have that sense of belonging, not just to their locality or to their country, but belonging to the world as a whole. And that roundedness of approach and that global citizenship and international mindedness is a real gift in what is becoming an increasingly interconnected world. Yes. So I think that would possibly be the one that I would debunk, that international means that it just people are moving to and from. And I think that there's a great richness, and actually for us we see a great stability within our school.
And actually it's sort of a little bit of a head start compared to the way the sector's moving as a whole, in the sense that sense of an excellent education has to be a diverse education, has to include kind of experiences and opportunities to think of yourself and to understand what it means to be a global citizen. Means that actually you're partway there already in some of that.
Yes, absolutely. I think we are. And I think it's also further enhanced by the curriculum we follow. And I think that the IB fosters that too, through its middle years programme and its diploma programme, and also actually being part of a global network of schools. So we're one of 20 RSHM schools around the world. And even this week I was at a conference with heads and teachers from those 20 schools, and we shared such great conversations about inclusion and diversity, and about how we as a network of schools can live out our mission and ethos in what is an ever-changing world. It was so I think it's a great gift actually for me as a head, but also for our school community.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Margaret, for your time today. I love that we've spanned from kind of the functionality of how to develop a strategic plan, and kind of the importance of that engagement and involvement, all the way through to leadership style, global citizenship, the importance of having a sense of how you're delivering on some of those really important social trends that we're seeing, and the need to have our young people, as we mentioned back at the very beginning, able to make a difference into a really globalized, interconnected, diverse world. So Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Wonderful. Bye-bye, everybody then.
Thanks for listening to the Independent School Podcast, the podcast that helps senior leaders in private schools to think and act more strategically, both because they want to secure the future of their school and because they want to help build a more equal and just world. You can listen in everywhere that podcasts are available. And if you want to catch up on previous episodes or follow any of the links that I've mentioned today, just head over to www.consultjuliet.co.uk/podcast.